my great pleasure to present today the winner of the Rudolf Wildenmann Prize of the ECPR. The Rudolf Wildenmann Prize is awarded every year to an early career scholar who is either before his PhD or 5 years after receiving it, in recognition of an outstanding paper presented at the joint session of workshop of ECPR. And today we are celebrating the winner of the Rudolf Wildenmann Prize 24. And it's my pleasure as the chair of the jury to present you the results and also to introduce the winner. The Rudolf Wildenmann Prize is to celebrate the work of Professor Rudolf Wildenmann. He is a famous German political scientist. He is one of the founding fathers of empirical election research, and he built up the social science infrastructure in Germany and Europe. He was very famous to study elections in a scientific way in Germany, and he was the leader of the research group Elections in Mannheim, and he was also a founder of the German Politbarometer, which is measuring political attitudes and behavior in German society. Rudolf Wildenmann was a very important member of the so-called Cologne School of Political Science, together with Max Kase and Erwin Scheuch. Now to the prize. It's my honor to represent the jury of the award to you. The jury consists of leading editors of journals which are linked and done by ECPR. So members are Stephen van Howard from Forward College. He's the editor of Political Research Exchange. Secondly, Professor Theophanis Exarchopoulos from the University of Surrey. He's editor of the European Political Science Review. Isabel Engeli, she's from the University of Essex, and she's the editor of the European Journal of Political Research. And Gulsa Kapan from the University of Erfurt. She's editor of the European Journal of International Relations. So the winner of this year of the Rudolf Wildenmann Prize, we are very pleased to announce, is Timon Forster from the University of St. Gallen. He presented a paper at the ECPR joint workshops, and his paper was called Selective Responses to the Climate Crisis, International Financial Institutions and Strategic Ignorance. The justification of the prize going to Timon Forster is as follows. Amidst the climate crisis, major international financial institutions, so-called IFIs, have recognized the need for involvement in financing low-carbon development, and many of them have committed to aligning their efforts with the so-called Paris Agreement. The paper of Timon examines how international financial institutions like the World Bank respond to global warming. In his paper, Timon Forster from the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland is posing the following research questions. How do these institutions respond to global warming? Which aspects of climate change do they emphasize? Which dimensions of climate change do they neglect? The main thesis of the paper is that those institutions exercise strategic ignorance. While the increased focus on climate issues of IFIs has not gone unnoticed in recent research, the discursive praxis around climate change, and particularly what IFIs do not say when they talk about climate change, have received not much attention. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Timon Forster to you. And I would like to give the floor now to the winner of the Rudolf Wildenmann Prize for 2024, to Mr. Timon Forster from the University of St. Gallen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Timon Forster, a postdoctoral research fellow in international relations at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, where I work on the political economy of international organizations and development. I am very honored to receive the Rudolf Wildenmann Prize, and I would like to thank the jury. I would like to thank you, Christian, for considering all these papers, for your work. And I would also like to thank Bernhard Reinsberg and Uli Steger for organizing the workshop on interconnected challenges of global governance institutions at the ECPR joint sessions, and of course for nominating my paper. Now, as you said, Christian, the paper's aim of understanding, or is understanding how international financial institutions, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, regional development banks, how they respond to climate change. And this interest really stems from a simple fact. We need climate finance. According to some estimates, we need an additional $3 trillion per year by 2030 to fund climate action. And against this background, international financial institutions, they have a key role to play in mobilizing these resources, in supporting the needed reforms. And of course, they have indeed recognized the need for their involvement, but their responses, they vary in terms of policy reforms in these organizations, in terms of resources dedicated to climate change, and importantly, for the purposes of my paper, the responses also vary in the way that they talk about the issue. For example, in September 22, then World Bank President David Malpass was invited to speak on a panel about climate finance in New York, and he was repeatedly asked whether he believed in human-made climate change. He tried to evade the question several times before ultimately saying that he doesn't know, he's not a climate scientist. And this is very different from the approach that IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva takes. Just a few months earlier, she started a speech by saying that the science is clear. Only decisive action to contain climate change will prevent disastrous outcomes for people and economies. And so I was curious to understand their responses. How can we make sense of this? And how does it relate to climate reforms and climate policies in the Global South in particular? And I make sense of these public appearances of leaders of IFIs by drawing on work in the subfield of ignorance studies. In particular, I suggest that IFIs seek to exercise strategic ignorance, that they're trying to shift the boundary between what's known and what's unknown, that they try to leverage the uncertainty surrounding climate change to their benefit. And I also suggest that these attempts at, or the potential attempts at exercising such strategic ignorance is manifest in the public appearances of their leaders. Empirically, I then build a new text corpus of approximately 1,600 speeches delivered by the leaders of the IMF, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the African Development Bank. And I use a range of different text analytic methods to identify climate change narratives in these speeches. My results so far show that, perhaps not surprisingly, the climate change communication, or the focus on climate change in these speeches, has increased considerably over time. But more importantly, I also find meaningful variation across institutions. For example, the Asian Development Bank most frequently uses a development frame, that climate action has economic co-benefits, and that there is a need for technological innovation. The IMF, on the other hand, talks extensively about the risks and potential catastrophes that would result from a failure to combat climate change. Now, this work is still ongoing, in part because of the excellent and extensive feedback that I received at the workshop organized by Bernard and Uli at the joint sessions of the ECPR meetings. There were a number of very fruitful and intense discussions over a few days, all connected to the theme of interconnected challenges of global governance institutions. And this informs, or I think the workshop for me informs, not only this ongoing paper, but also other work that I'm doing, all related to different aspects of governance and decision-making of international organizations. Most recently, I have published an article with Dan Honig and Alexandros Kentikelenis in the Review of International Political Economy, where we examine when, how, and why states act on formal governance bodies. I am also studying the deliberative potential of international organizations in their decision-making. I'm also examining the role of speaking order and applying conversation analysis to international organizations, to name just two of the papers that I'm currently working on. Once again, I'm very honored to receive the Wildenmann Prize, and I look forward to further engaging with the ECPR community. Thank you.
Thank you, Timon. The jury is concluding that the author breaks new ground by introducing the concept of strategic ignorance, which allows him to argue that IFIS will communicate selectively and strategically about climate change. In other words, they will emphasize those aspects of the climate crisis that they could most convincingly use to advance their own agendas and resource base. Looking at 1,599 or 1,600 speeches of IFA leaders, which are the key figureheads representing the organization as a whole, from 4 IFIs in the period 2010 to 23, the author applies several cutting-edge text analysis methods to systematically extract and figure out whether and how IFIs communicate about climate change issues. And finally, the paper addresses a pressing and relevant issue with significant potential for impact, considering the financial impact of leading IFIs, which have a potentially strong influence on sustainable ecological transformations in the long run. The paper is very innovative and presents a clear and original argument. The basis of the paper is an excellent methodological framework. It is a very promising paper with a wealth of data and a very appealing argument. So on behalf of the jury and on behalf of the ECPR as a member of the Executive Committee of ECPR, it is my great pleasure to award this Rudolf Wildenmann Prize to you, Timon, and we wish you all the best for your bright and brilliant future as a rising star of political science. Thank you very much, and congratulations to you and your team.